Welcome in. It's really fantastic to have you here with us for another deep dive. Pull up a chair, get comfortable, because today we're pitching you on a journey.
We really are.
Yeah, we're going way, way back to the raw, untamed beginnings of Greek mythology. But if you're expecting us to just recount the same old sanitized bedtime stories you might have heard growing up, think again.
Right, those pop culture versions leave out all the best parts.
Exactly. We have gathered a massive stack of incredible sources for this. We've got detailed historical translations, really obscure mythological transcripts, and some deep-cut academic analyses. And we're going to extract the most fascinating, surprising nuggets about three iconic mythological pillars.
Three massive pillars.
We're looking at Hades, the ruler of the underworld, Medusa, the cursed Gorgon, and the single, surprisingly insignificant spark that lit the fires of the Trojan War.
It's a heavy lineup.
It is. Our mission today is to look right past the caricature. We want to understand the profound human truth, the incredibly complex cosmic systems, and the deeply tragic choices hidden in these ancient stories. Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at the ultimate administrator of the afterlife, a mortal priestess turned protective emblem, and a petty divine dispute that literally doomed an entire civilization.
That framing sets us up perfectly, I think, because the unifying theme across all of these incredibly rich sources we're examining today is a single word: consequence.
Consequence, yeah.
We often think of the gods of ancient Greece as merely capricious, just throwing lightning bolts whenever they throw a tantrum.
Like overgreen toddlers with superpowers.
Exactly. But the systems they build and the mortals they either punish or use for their own ends, they carry the true crushing weight of existence. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these myths weren't just campfire stories for ancient past the time.
Right, they were functional.
Highly functional. They were the primary architecture humanity used to process the inevitability of death, the sheer helpless injustice of unchecked power, and the terrifying ripple effects of a single solid.
Which is exactly why I want to dive straight into the first of our three pillars, Hades.
A very misunderstood figure.
So misunderstood. Because if you look at modern media-like movies, comic books, video games, Hades is almost always portrayed as this fiery, evil, cackling villain. He's basically the ancient Greek equivalent of Satan.
Right, surrounded by hellfire.
Yeah, but our sources paint a completely different picture, a shockingly stoic one. And to understand him, you really have to look at the crucible of his confinement. I find his origins absolutely marvel-inducing.
It's a dark.
It really is. Imagine you were born and your very first experience of existence is being swallowed alive by your father.
It is a profoundly traumatic genesis. Kronos, the Titan king, had heard a prophecy that his children would overthrow him. So his solution was to just consume them.
Just eat them.
Yes. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, and Hades swallowed whole. But you have to consider the environment inside the stomach. This isn't just a biological digestion process. It's a cosmic prison.
Total suffocating darkness.
Right. And unlike his younger siblings, like Zeus or Poseidon, who eventually got to bask in the sunlight and the glory of rebellion, Hades spent his formative millennia in that pitch black.
I always assumed the gods inside Kronos were just, screaming in terror for centuries.
Yeah.
Banging on the walls.
That would be the natural assumption.
But the sources note something entirely different about Hades. He didn't panic. He didn't grow sorrowful or furious. He grew steady.
That is the defining trait of his character. In that cramped, dark space, with only the muffled pulse of a terrified father echoing around, Hades learned the soft, unending weight of stillness. He became intimate with silence.
Wow.
Think about what that does to a psyche. He actually learned the profound cosmic truth that all things, even the sprawling end, he tasted confinement long before he ever.
That makes so much sense.
It really cultivated an inward calm, a detachment, that his siblings who were raised on the outside are quickly freed. They simply never developed.
And that profound calm becomes his absolute greatest weapon during the Titanomachy. This is the 10-year war against the Titans.
The war that breaks the world.
Yeah. So Zeus finally forces Kronos to throw up his siblings, and they emerge into this bright, blinding, incredibly loud world and immediately go to war. They free the Cyclops from Tartarus, and in return, the Cyclops forge weapons for the three brothers.
The iconic weapons.
Right. Zeus gets a loud, flashy thunderbolt. Poseidon gets the earth-shattering trident. They get weapons of mass destruction. But Hades, he gets something far quieter. The helm of dark, the helm of invisibility.
The contrast the text draws here is brilliant. Zeus and Poseidon were externalizing their power. They used loud, raw force, hurling lightning that scarred the sky and churning oceans that swallowed land.
Just pure chaos.
Exactly. But Hades operated with a silent, relentless precision. The helm allowed him to slip into unseen places, moving like a shadow across a battlefield of giants. He didn't revel in the chaos. He studied the mechanics of the war with a mind sharpened by ages of sensory deprivation.
He saw the patterns.
He saw patterns, he saw weaknesses.
Which leads to this incredible pivotal moment during the war that our sources detail. And I could not believe I had never heard this before.
It's a detail often left out of the summary.
So Kronos is losing, and desperate to win, he actually bends time itself. He slows time to an absolute crawl across the battlefield. Picture this. The Olympian soldiers freeze mid-stride. Lightning bolts are just hanging motionless in the air.
It's like a photograph.
Yeah. Even Zeus stumbles, completely disoriented by the heavy, sludgy drag of time.
It's a localized temporal distortion. Kronos is the god of time, after all. He twists it into it completely neutralizes the brute force.
But not Hades, because Hades had spent what felt like an eternity dealing with the exact same heavy, slow drag of time inside Kronos' stomach.
It was familiar to him.
He recognizes the feeling. He doesn't panic. He uses that deeply traumatic memory as an anchor to keep his bearing. He puts on the helm of darkness, steps right into the distortion field, and walks up to his father.
Unseen and unaffected.
He doesn't try to kill Kronos. The Titan's too vast for that. But he shatters Kronos' concentration entirely. He strikes a critical blow that breaks the time spell, opening Kronos up for Zeus to deliver the final, flashy finishing move. It is a masterpiece of tactical pace.
It really recontextualizes who won that war. Zeus got all the credit, but Hades broke the stalemate, and when the war ends, the world is completely ravaged. The three brothers are standing over the ruins of the cosmos, and they have to decide who rules what.
Right, the division of the spoil.
The text described them bringing out an ancient urn carved from the earth's earliest bones to draw lots. Ultimate game of chance. Zeus draws the sky, Poseidon draws, and Hades draws the realm.
And here's the thing that blows my mind. He doesn't complain at all. Poseidon is grumbling about not getting the sky. Zeus is throwing a literal victory parade. But Hades just nods. He takes his lot and walks down into the dark.
What's fascinating here is that the sources are very explicit about his internal state. Hades absolutely did not view this as a punishment.
Not at all.
He didn't see it as an exile from the glittering peaks of Olympus. He felt a deep, profound sense of rightness. When he descended into the underworld for the first time, it felt like a homecoming.
A homecoming to the dark.
He recognized that the underworld was the natural endpoint of the calm that had always lived inside him. He didn't want the loud, chaotic glory of the sky or the restless shifting of the ocean. He wanted the silence where the oldest truths settle.
But he didn't just sit there in the dark brooding. He enthusiastically set to work. I love reading the breakdown of what he actually built. The underworld wasn't some fiery pit of random chaos. It was a functioning, highly organized bureaucracy.
A massive infrastructure project.
Let's break down the sheer scale of the architecture he put in place, starting with the rivers. He didn't just have a moat. He had 5 distinct rivers that served as boundaries and psychological processing channels for arriving souls.
And each river served a highly specific function for the human psyche.
Right. First, you have the Styx, the river of unbreakable oaths. This one is so potent that even the gods swear by it. And if they break an oath on the Styx, they are forced into a coma for a year and exiled for 9.
It enforces cosmic law.
Then there's Acheron. This isn't just a river of general sadness. It's the river of sorrow and unspoken burden. It holds everything a soul never had the courage to say in life.
That's a crucial distinction. The Acheron strips away the repressed emotional weight so the soul can actually be judged. Then we have Phlegethon, which is often severely misunderstood.
The river of fire.
It's a river of fire, yes, but it wasn't fire that burns your flesh. It was a purifying fire meant to burn away lingering mortal hatred and rage without consuming the soul itself.
It's almost therapeutic. Then there's the famous one, Lethe, the silver waters of forgetfulness. It offered mercy to those who were too burdened by their mortal memories to move on.
Unnecessary.
And finally, Cocytus, the river of lamentation, specifically for souls who arrived with deeply unfulfilled desires, freezing them in a glacial pace until they can let go.
The structural genius of Hades doesn't stop with the hydrology. He knew he couldn't personally evaluate the moral weight of every single mortal who died. The volume would be impossible.
Oh, too much paperwork.
So he established an appellate system. He appointed 3 kings from mortal history who were renowned for their fairness to act as judge: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and
Notice he didn't pick gods to judge humans.
Exactly. He picked humans to judge humans. They weighed lives with absolute impartiality, free from divine emotion or bias.
And based on those judgments, you were sorted. It wasn't just heaven or hell. It was highly categorized.
Yeah.
You had the asphodel meadows for the ordinary, those who were neither exceptionally virtuous nor exceptionally wicked, just average folks wandering in a gray mist.
The majority of humanity.
Then Elysia, a paradise for the honorable and the brave. which our sources note eventually expanded to include the elect, who actively sought out reincarnation to try and live perfectly 3 times. Then there's Tartarus.
Let's clarify Tartarus. It wasn't a dungeon of random sadistic torture. It was a labyrinth of pure consequence for the truly wicked.
Pure consequence.
It was a place where the punishment precisely, ironically, fit the disruption the person caused to cosmic order. If you tried to cheat death, you pushed a boulder forever. If you stole from the gods, you starved with food just out of reach. It was mathematical justice.
And to make sure this massive system was respected, he had the guardian, Cerberus, the massive 3-headed hound. But our texts specify he didn't just bark. Each head had a distinct temperament to guard the gates perfectly.
Highly specialized.
One head slept, one watched the living, one watched the dead, and then the Fury, Alecto, Megara, and Tisiphone. They were the terrifying enforcers of oath, but they weren't evil. They were completely necessary for maintaining the balance.
What you have to take away from this is that Hades ruled not by spectacular displays of power, but by sheer necessity and order. Even his obsidian palace was strictly functional.
No gold plating.
None. It wasn't boastful like the gleaming marble of Mount Olympus. It was a place designed for a king whose realm required absolute, unwavering steady. He was the ultimate impartial sir.
But a realm of pure ending needs a counterbalance, right? Which brings us to one of the most famous myths in human history, but framed so entirely differently in our source, Persephone.
A vital part of the underworld structure.
She's the daughter of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. We all know the basic pop culture story. She's out gathering flowers, the earth violently opens up, Hades snatches her in his dark chariot and drags her to hell.
The classic abduction narrative.
But I have to say, looking at the transcripts, I want to push back on that narrative. Is the text just giving us ancient patriarchal myth-making to justify an abduction?
It's a completely valid question, and one scholars debate endlessly. But if we look purely at the theological and mythological sources provided, they emphasize a very specific framing. Hades wasn't driven by impulsive, selfish lust like Zeus or Poseidon constantly were.
He wasn't acting on a whim.
He had observed Persephone over centuries. He had a cosmic recognition that his realm of endings was becoming stagnant. It desperately needed a counterbalance. It needed the energy of transition and renewal that she embodied as a goddess of spring.
And the sources note her reaction to being taken was incredibly unusual. She didn't dissolve into a weeping victim. The texts say she observed the underworld with profound calm.
Precisely. She looked at the rivers, the judges, the intricate structure of the realm, and she recognized its structural necessity. She didn't panic. She was calculating and observant. She saw a kingdom that was flawlessly organized but completely devoid of empathy.
Meanwhile, above ground, Demeter is experiencing catastrophic world-ending grief. She completely withdraws her powers, causing a global famine that threatens to wipe out humanity entirely.
Yeah, Earth's just...
This forces Zeus to finally intervene. He sends Hermes down to broker a deal, and this is where the famous pomegranate seeds come in. Because Persephone ate the seed, whether she was tricked or did it willingly to ensure she had a tether to the throne, she is bound to the underworld for part of the year. This creates our season.
The compromise is vital because it changes the underworld forever. Persephone didn't become a captive, sitting in the dark, pining to the sun. She became an active, highly adaptive co-ruler.
An equal partner.
She sat beside Hades on an equal throne, carved from the same dark stone. She offered insights into the emotional, fragile state of arriving human souls that Hades, with his austere, cold logic, sometimes entirely missed. She refined the flow of the rivers, she directed the psychopomps, the spirit guides who escorted the dead, and she brought an understanding of life's complex psyche to this static realm.
I honestly love seeing how their partnership actually scaled the underworld through human history. The sources go into so much detail about how the realm had to adapt over millennia as human civilization changed and grew more complicated.
It wasn't a static system.
Take the ancient age of heroes. You had these arrogant interlopers showing up while still alive. Heracles comes down, and he actually subdues Cerberus without weapons, just using pure discipline and respect for the beast.
Orpheus is another great example.
Yes. Orpheus shows up, and he moves the entire realm, literally slowing the rivers and making the Furies pause their whipping with pure, unadulterated musical grief.
But then you have the inverse. You have Theseus and Pirithous who show up with absolute hubris, planning to literally kidnap Persephone.
Just walk in and take her.
And Hades doesn't scream or fight them. He invites them to sit down at a banquet, and the stone chairs simply merge with their flesh, immobilizing them forever. It perfectly illustrates how the underworld responded to a mortal's intent.
But as time marches on, the challenges grow far beyond dealing with individual pesky heroes. Imagine you're Hades, and suddenly the Roman Empire rises. They bring millions of souls shaped by complex bureaucracy, rigid laws, and massive infrastructure.
A totally different mindset.
The judges, We know Rhadamanthus, Aeacus had to adapt their entire criteria to evaluate lives that were intertwined with massive civic systems rather than just tribal warfare.
And then consider the logistical nightmares of mass mortality events. The sources extrapolate how the Black Death in Europe and the Mongol conquests across Asia sent tens of millions of souls downward in a matter of days.
A flood of souls.
This required mass processing adjustments on a cosmic scale. Persephone had to deploy countless more psychopomps just to manage the sheer panic of souls arriving in such chaotic, terrifying. It was an ancient Greek HR crisis.
And it keeps going. During the dawn of modernity, the Renaissance brings souls shaped by science and philosophy. You have minds like Descartes and John Locke arriving in the underworld, ready to question the very reality of the afterlife.
Demanding empirical proof of Tartarus.
Exactly. The world wars bring industrial-scale trauma, weapons of mass destruction that obliterate the body and the mind, which forces Persephone to massively expand the restorative soothing properties of the River Lethe just to handle the incoming shell shock.
Even reaching into the digital age, the texts describe modern souls arriving totally fragmented.
Fragmented how?
They are overwhelmed by virtual identities, global anxiety, the 24-hour news cycle, and severe information. It prompted Hades and Persephone to create entirely new calming chambers, basically cosmic sensory deprivation tank, just to reassemble a modern soul before.
Key takeaway from all of this historical scaling is so profound. Through every single human era, through all our wars and inventions and neuroses, Hades and Persephone never judged the changing cultures themselves.
They remained objective.
They never cared about your politics or your era. They only judged the conduct of the individual soul. The underworld remained the ultimate impartial equalizer, effortlessly expanding its obsidian architecture to accommodate whatever new complexities humanity managed to invent.
It's a remarkably comforting thought in a way. The system adapts to hold us.
It really is.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If Hades represents the flawless, impartial architecture of endings and order, our next subject represents the exact opposite. She represents the endurance of the abused in the face of profound divine injustice.
A stark contrast.
Let's shift our focus to Medusa. We all know the image. She is the snake-haired monster whose gaze turns men to stone, a terrifying beast to be slain. But the raw mythological transcripts tell a story that is utterly heartbreaking. She wasn't born a monster.
Not at all. She was the only mortal daughter of two ancient, terrifying forces. All of her siblings were immortal monsters, but Medusa was born mortal at breath.
Golden hair and sea green eyes.
The texts specifically highlight that, yes, but she wanted absolutely no part of the chaotic, violent sea that her parents. She desperately.
So she seeks out sanctuary. She travels to the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, civilization, and strategy. Medusa becomes a devoted, quiet priestess.
A life of chosen isolation.
Picture the visual here. This beautiful young woman finding her solace in the highly disciplined, quiet rituals of polishing bronze shields, sweeping the marble floors, and tending the sacred fire. It's a life of purity.
It's a picture of total devotion and serenity, but to understand what happens next, you have to look at the divine politics raging above her head. There was an intense, ancient, incredibly bitter rivalry between Athena, goddess of wisdom and land, and Poseidon, the god of a chaotic sea.
They hated each other.
They had literally fought over who would be the patron deity of Athens. Poseidon held a massive grudge. And he wasn't just attracted to Medusa's beauty. When he looked at her in that temple, he saw an opportunity to violently defile Athena's most sacred space.
And the text is unflinching here. This wasn't a seduction. Poseidon's act was a profound violation. He corners her in the temple. He shatters Medusa's sanctuary, violently asserting the chaotic power of the sea over the ordered stone of Athena's domain. It is a brutal desecration.
And the aftermath is where the true horror of the myth lies. Athena discovers the desecration of her temple, but gods rarely punish other gods. The political fallout on Mount Olympus.
So she punches down.
So Athena's reaction is the ultimate horrific victim blame. Instead of directing her wrath at Poseidon, who committed the act, Athena blames Medusa. She accuses Medusa of purposefully defiling the temple with her vanity.
The transformation sequence is described in such terrifying, visceral detail. A blinding light fills the temple. Medusa falls to the floor in agony. Her beautiful golden hair, which she had spent hours brushing and braiding as a priestess, begins to move.
The curse takes hold.
It turns into writhing, hissing, venomous serpents. Her skin turns pallid and scaled. Her eyes shift from a gentle sea green to a deep storm green, glowing with an internal.
And the immediate tragic consequence is so painful.
She accidentally looks up at a fellow priest who runs in to help her. The moment they make eye contact, he is instantly, horrifyingly turned to solid stone.
The realization of what she has become hits her in an instant. She realizes she is a walking weapon. She is a plague. So she runs. She flees to the furthest western edge of the world into total exile, far away from any human settlements.
But what the sources reveal about her time in exile is astonishing. This is the part of the deep dive that really changed my perspective.
It redefines her entirely.
Medusa didn't become a mindless killer roaming the countryside, hunting down travelers. She developed a profound, hypervigilant discipline to ensure she never hurt anyone else. The texts detail her survival mechanics, and they are agonizing.
It is a life of constant, terrifying self-control.
Imagine the physical and psychological tension. The transcripts detail how she learned to move only at night, navigating by the dim light of the moon. When she was thirsty, she couldn't just lean over a stream to drink.
Because of her reflection.
If she saw her own reflection, she would unleash the power on herself or turn the riverbed to stone. So she would kneel, look away, and cup water backward from a muddy puddle to drink.
Just to survive without causing harm.
There is a specific anecdote where a wild stag wanders into her path, and instead of turning it to stone for food, she drops to her knees, keeps her head strictly bowed into the dirt, and waits hours for the animal to leave. She created an incredibly strict ethical perimeter for herself.
It's a survival story, fundamentally. She masters her curse. She learns that blurred reflections, like a polished bronze shield or ruffled water, diffuse the magic and spare her from her own deadly gaze. She doesn't let the curse strip away her morality.
And eventually, she isn't completely alone in the dark.
Her immortal winged Sistino and Uriel, who are also Gorgons but don't have the petrifying gaze, finally track her down.
And they bring love, they bring laughter, and a fragile, beautiful peace to her ruined sanctuary at the edge of the world. They hunt for her, they brush the serpents from her face, they give her a semblance of family.
That sisterhood is a vital element of the source material. It proves that despite Athena's best efforts to turn her into an unfeeling monster, Medusa retained her deep humanity and her capacity.
And I absolutely love how the texts describe Medusa treating the statues of the men who tried to hunt her down. Because eventually word gets out and heroes come looking for glory. They charge at her and she is forced to look at them in self-defense.
She has no choice.
But she doesn't view these stone figures as trophies of her kills. She actually names Asterion, Kaidan, Kalanara. She views them as an accidental, silent congregation. She walks among them at night, gently brushing the moss off their stone shoulders, apologizing to them.
There's even a moment in one of the deeper transcripts where a dying, feverish soldier who isn't hunting her just stumbles into her realm after a battle. He's in absolute agony, begging for an end to his pain.
And she helps.
And Medusa, out of pure mercy, steps out of the shadows. She lets him look at her, granting him a peaceful, painless death by turning him to stone. She preserves him in a state of eternal calm, an act of euthanasia.
This raises an important question. If she is hiding at the edge of the world, quietly surviving, how did this cursed, exiled figure become a massive protective symbol across the entire ancient Mediterranean world?
That is the ultimate paradox of her story. The texts show that while she was hiding, the rumor of her power spread. Mortals began to carve Medusa's staring face, called the Gorgonian, onto their battle shields, the prows of their ships, and the doorways of their homes and temples. They realized that the terrifying, unflinching power of her gaze could be harnessed to ward off evil. The logic was, if you have the monster protecting your house, no lesser evil will dare enter. What Athena meant to isolate and punish her actually elevated. It made Medusa an omnipresent guardian humanity.
But the gods on Olympus, particularly Athena, absolutely cannot handle that. They are furious that Medusa is becoming a symbol of mortal power and protection rather than a pathetic cautionary tale of divine wrath.
They want the narrative back under their control.
So they decide to end it. They send the hero Perseus. And let's be clear, they do not fight fair. They rigged the Perseus doesn't just show up with a sword. He arrives armed to the teeth with divine artifacts.
It's completely asymmetrical.
Athena gives him a perfectly mirrored shield, Hermes gives him winged sandals so he can fly, and Hades actually loans him the Helm of Shadows so he can turn invisible.
It's a divine hit squad coordinated against one weary woman. The confrontation itself is steeped in tragic beauty. When Perseus finally arrives at her sanctuary, Medusa isn't a roaring, mindless beast waiting to devour him.
She's just tired.
She is tired. She is so deeply exhausted by her existence. She is fully aware that he is coming, and she actually speaks to him. She acknowledges that he is just a pawn, an instrument of the gods' cruelty, playing out a script they wrote for him. She doesn't run.
Exactly. And Perseus uses the reflection in the polished shield to approach her without looking at her directly.
Yeah.
And he strikes the fatal blow. But here's the critical moment that the sources highlight. When the sword comes down, Perseus realizes he hasn't slain a monster.
He sees the truth.
He looks at her severed head, and he realizes he's slain a reflection of divine injustice.
And the aftermath of her death is just as poetic as her life. From her severed neck, the text says glowing golden blood spills out onto the rock. And from that blood, creation is literally born from her ruin. Pegasus, the magnificent winged horse, and Chrysaor, a golden warrior, spring forth from the womb. Furthermore, where droplets of her blood hit the earth, these beautiful crimson and gold flowers called blood anemones instantly bloom. Even in violent death, she brings brings incredible beauty into the world.
Perseus takes the head, uses it to save a princess, and eventually gives it back to Athena. Athena takes the severed head of the woman she cursed and places it dead center on her Aegis shield.
But the source notes something truly remarkable about that final act. Athena, looking at the Gorgon's face permanently affixed to her shield, experiences a rare moment of divine perhaps even mercy.
She realizes what she's done.
She realizes that her curse, which was meant to destroy a mortal woman and erase her from history, has instead immortalized. It created an eternal symbol of endurance. It's a fascinating synthesis of texts find Medusa's modern as the forgotten feminine.
A powerful shift.
Over centuries, she has transformed from a violated victim to a terrifying monster, to a profound symbol of survival, truth, and the terrifying, beautiful integration.
It is a stunning reframing of a story I thought I knew inside and out. But if Hades shows us the necessity of order, and Medusa shows us the sheer endurance of a mortal against unfair gods, our final deep dive shows us what happens when divine vanity and human passion violently collide.
The spark that lit the world on fire.
Let's transition from the desolate, quiet edge of the world to a glittering, opulent bank. We're zooming in on the wedding of the mortal king Peleus and the beautiful sea nymph Theta.
This is the social event of the mythological age.
Everyone who is anyone is there. Apollo is playing the lyre, Poseidon's holding court, Zeus is presiding, Athena, Hera, Aphrodite, they're all dressed in their divine best, drinking nectar. It is joy. But there is one glaring omission on the guest list. Eris, the goddess of discord and strife, is deliberately left out.
Now, to understand the sheer catastrophic weight of this snub, we have to talk about the ancient Greek concept of xenia.
This is so crucial.
Xenia translates roughly to hospitality, but it was so much more than that. It was the absolute bedrock of their society, a sacred law protected by Zeus himself. It governed the strict, honorable ways hosts and guests were required to each other.
It wasn't just good manner.
To snub a guest, to deliberately exclude someone from a feast of this magnitude is not just rude, it is an extreme danger. And to snub the literal goddess of strife, that is a cosmic miscalculation, epic proportions. You are begging for chaos.
Think of it like dropping a live grenade at a modern Thanksgiving dinner, but infinitely worse. And Eris doesn't even make a scene. She doesn't kick in the doors, flip the banquet tables, or scream at Zeus.
She is far too calculated for that.
She just walks into the hall, entirely uninvited, and silently rolls a solid gold apple across the marble. It clinks against the stone, stopping right in the middle of the room. And inscribed on this gleaming apple is one lethal, perfectly calibrated phrase, "For the fair."
It is a psychological masterstroke. She doesn't attack them. She turns their own vanity against them.
Immediately, the three most powerful goddesses in the room, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, all lunge for it. They all claim they are the fairest. And Zeus, who is no fool, knows better than to judge a beauty contest between his terrifyingly powerful wife and two of his most lethal daughters in his own house.
It's a no-win scenario for him.
If he picks one, the other two will make his immortal life a living hell. So he delegates the task, he passes the buck to a mortal. He points down to earth, to a young shepherd tending his flock on the slopes of Mount Ida.
And we have to ask, who is this shepherd? Why him? His name is Paris, or sometimes Alexandros in the text. But he isn't just a simple peasant shepherd. He is secretly a Trojan prince.
And his backstory is intense.
His backstory is steeped in... Before his birth, his mother, Queen Hecuba of the great walled city of Troy, had a terrifying prophetic dream. She dreamed she didn't give birth to a human child, but to a flaming torch that writhed with snakes and burned the entire magnificent city of Troy to cinders.
A literal fire starter.
Horrified by the prophecy, King Priam ordered the baby to be taken to Mount Ida and exposed to the elements to die.
But a shepherd found him, took pity on him, saved him, and raised him in total ignorance of his royal blood, or the apocalyptic prophecy hanging over his head.
So Paris grows up thinking he's just a handsome guy watching sheep. Until one sunny afternoon, Hermes, the messenger of the gods, beams down to the pasture, bringing these three radiant, terrifying, towering goddesses with him.
Imagine the sheer terror and awe of that moment for a mortal. Hermes hands Paris the golden apple and tells him, Zeus commands you to choose who is the fairest. And by the way, they're all going to bribe. So what does this all mean? The text breaks down the philosophical and psychological weight of the bribes they offer him, and it's brilliant. It's basically a personality test for this young man. Hera, the majestic queen of heaven, steps forward. She doesn't just offer him a kingdom, she offers him empire and law, dominion over all men across Asia and Europe, unimaginable wealth and absolute power.
Next is Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. She offers him strategy and technical mastery. She guarantees him glory in battle, invincibility against any foe, and the kind of intellectual brilliance that makes men legends for thousands.
And then Aphrodite steps up, the goddess of love and desire. She doesn't offer him power or glory, she offers him love. Specifically, she promises him the heart of the most beautiful mortal woman in the entire world, Helen of Sparta.
You have to look at the psychology of Paris here. If he had been raised as a prince in the court of Troy, surrounded by politic generals, he might have chosen Hera's empire or Athena's tactical genius.
You would have seen the value of power.
But he was raised a shepherd. He is a young, sheltered man, driven entirely by passion and aesthetic, untouched by the brutal ambitions of kings or the cold discipline of war. He looks at the three offers and he chooses Aphrodite. He hands her the golden apple. He chooses the promise of love. But this single, seemingly romantic choice sets off a catastrophic chain reaction.
Because Helen is already married to King Menelaus of Sparta. But before we get there, Paris's true identity is finally revealed by the gods. He goes down from the mountain and he is welcomed back into the glittering city of Troy as a long-lost prince.
Despite the prophecy,
King Priam, overjoyed to have his beautiful son back, completely ignores the old prophecies of the flaming torch. Paris is given ship, wealth, and status. And then, under the guise of diplomacy, Paris travels west across the Aegean Sea to Sparta, directly to the court of King Menelaus. And Menelaus, being a good king, welcomes him with open arms. He feeds him, houses him, honors him, and introduces him to his wife Helen.
Which brings us crashing right back to the sacred concept. By taking Helen, and the historical sources are heavily debated and ambiguous on whether she went willingly out of love, whether it was a violent theft, or whether it was entirely the heavy manipulative hand of Aphrodite overriding her free will. Paris shatters that sacred.
He breaks the foundational rule.
He takes the absolute generosity, the trust, and the hospitality of a host, and he repays it with the ultra. He steals the king's wife in a
transgression that makes the horrific 10-year Trojan War absolutely inevitable. It is a violation of cosmic law so profound that it will require the launch of 1,000 Greek ships to rectify.
The scale of the retaliation matches the scale of the insult.
It isn't just about a stolen wife. It's about a broken system of trust. Paris, the flaming torch from his mother's dream, has just lit the fire. The flywheel of fate makes its first patient turn toward the total burning of Troy, all because Eris rolled an apple into a wedding.
It's incredible how all these stories, as vastly different as they seem, weave together to form the bedrock of ancient myth. We've taken 3 deeply intense dives today, but look at what we've found by digging past.
So much more than we started.
We've seen how the ancient Greeks used these myths to explain the meticulous architecture of death and the profound necessity of consequence, stoic eyes. We've seen the sheer endurance of the abuse and the power of symbols to completely transcend the unjust gods who created them through the tragedy of Medusa. And we've seen how the wounded vanity of gods, combined with the reckless, unchecked passions of mortals, can literally burn down an entire magnificent civilization, starting with a single golden apple.
I love how these sources strip away the fantasy and show us the raw humanity underneath.
And while these are ancient myths from a world that has been buried in dust for millennia, the human elements within them are intensely, uncomfortably relatable. Think about it. The deep desire for order and fairness in a universe that's fleetly chaotic.
The incredibly heavy burden of bearing unfairness, trauma, and victim blame.
The catastrophic, unpredictable ripple effects of a single bad choice or a broken promise. These are universal truths. We still grapple with the exact same forces in our own life, even if you've stopped blaming them on God's rolling golden apples across marble.
I'm going to leave you with one final thought as we wrap this up. Think about the concept of memory across all 3 of these stories. Hades literally manages the erasure of memory with the river Lee, ensuring souls can forget their trauma and finally move on.
Memory as a burden to be shed.
Medusa, on the other hand, was cursed to be an unforgettable horror, yet she preserved the exact, flawless memory of her victims in perfect, unchanging stone. She was trapped by memory.
And the Trojan War.
That entire horrific 10-year slaughter was fought almost entirely so that the names of the men involved, Achilles, Hector, Agamemnon, would never be forgotten by history. Memory is the true hidden battleground of these, whether you are desperately trying to erase it to find peace, permanently frozen by it in exile, or willing to burn down a magnificent city just to become a permanent part of it.
It is the ultimate human.
It's something heavy to chew on the next time you try to recall a dream or worry about your legacy. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We loved having you, and we can't wait to explore more with you next time. Take care.